Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Ioka versus Martinez rematch. And so if you are new around here and you have not yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Ioka is 31 3-1 with 16 KOs, and Martinez is 17-0 with 9 KOs. This fight is for the WBA World Super Flyweight title. Their last fight ended with Martinez winning via unanimous decision. This is in Ioka's home country of Japan. Ioka has been pro since 2009. Ioka's losses have come versus Martinez in 2024, Nietes in 2018, and Ruong in 2014. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, this is Ioka Martinez 2. This is Ioka again fighting on New Year's Eve. It is him consistently fighting on New Year's Eve. It's, he fought, I believe, every year. I think he missed 2018, and I think he missed 2020, which was COVID, of course. So other than that, I'm pretty sure he's fought every single year, on New Year's Eve. And so it's an impressive stat. It's a bit of a random stat. I don't really know as to why he's consistently fighting on New Year's Eve so much, but like I said, he's doing it, and this is another chance for him to be able to do it. I don't necessarily know where he'll be this time next year, if he'll even be in the sport able to still fight on New Year's Eve, or like I say, I'm not too sure, but I'm sure going to be a big celebration again in Japan. Anybody who goes out to watch him, to support him, I'm sure are going to be wanting a show, wanting a big performance again, because of it being on New Year's Eve. That added perhaps pressure to perform because of the big celebration that will come in at the end. I'm not too sure, but like I say, this is the rematch. It was a very good contest last time between the two of them, to be honest, in my opinion. I mean, Martinez came with that pressure, which we know him for, and Ioka was trying to pick the shots and wear him down with some very good body shots and use his jab early and counter when he could, but Martinez inevitably was quite a bit too much for him. And perhaps it's a story of the younger gun being able to really push the tempo and be too much for Ioka, or perhaps it was just Ioka having an off night. But this one isn't for that IBF title. I find it interesting to see how Martinez has been stripped of that IBF title. It seems as though it's seemingly because of the IBF getting involved with stripping fighters again, and because rematches are happening, apparently that's a bad thing, and so a fighter has to be stripped. And it's happened many a times in recent times. I mean, we've seen it happen to Usyk, we've seen it happen to Canelo. Like I say, we've seen it happen in multiples of times where fighters are getting stripped of their titles just because they don't really want to fight a mandatory. And in Usyk's case, it was quite a bad reason. But in Martinez's case, he had this rematch opportunity with Ioka on New Year's Eve. I'm sure it's probably paid well. Ioka is a big name in the division in which, bar Jesse Bam Rodriguez, there isn't really many big names, and so Ioka is one of them big names. And so instead, Bibiano versus Garcia was fought for the IBF title. That ended in a draw, so the title is still vacant. So perhaps they could have still put it on for this fight, to be completely honest. But like I say, at the moment the IBF title is vacant. I'm sure if Martinez is able to pick up this win versus Ioka in the rematch, then perhaps he will probably want to go reclaim back with that IBF belt, and perhaps fight like a Jesse Van Rodriguez for the belt. I'm not too sure, but like I say, that's just not a part of this fight. That's not something to worry about or even consider. But Martinez as a fighter, I think he's now, for this rematch, been given more respect as a champion. He was a certified champion, to be honest. I mean, he beat Enkayas twice with that IBF belt, and then I can't remember the guy whose name he fought, but it was an 18-0 undefeated American in America. So he's been willing to go to other people's home countries and really test himself. And then he fought Ioka, and perhaps a lot of people did underestimate Ioka and think that, Martinez, and think that Ioka was just going to be able to really kind of outclass him like he had been doing against a lot of opponents, previous to that. But Martinez came very, very tough, very durable, very strong, and was able to really bullishly go through Ioka. And I'll speak a bit more about what he did well in just a moment. But like I say, it's interesting to see that he's willing to go back to Japan again. You know, in the first fight, he was the away fighter. He had it all against him, and he was willingly went to Japan to fight. And this time he's back again. Perhaps it just shows the level in which Japanese events have grown in these lower weight divisions since, of course, the likes of Inoue and Nakatani. They've really been shaping these big Japanese events. But this one, it hasn't got that top rank backing. It's not a huge Japanese event, but it's still got Martinez willing to come over, the champion willing to come over, and I think there hasn't really been too much of annoyance with judging in Japan. It seems like they've been quite fair and given a lot of the time quite fair results from what I've personally seen. So perhaps fighters are more willing to go over there because they aren't as worried about being robbed of a fight or something like that. That perhaps, you don't always see Americans being willing, American champions willing to go over to like the UK, for example, because perhaps they think that they have that ego and they think that there's no reason why they should go over to the other person's home country, or perhaps they think their judging is bad and things like that. So, it doesn't seem to be the case with Martinez. He's willing to go over to Japan again against a freeweight world champion in Ioka. To be honest, I personally am quite glad to see the rematch. I think it's deserved. I mean, like I say, I've just mentioned that freeweight world champion. He slipped up against Martinez perhaps, and this fight's going to prove to see if that was a slip up or not. Obviously he'd had losses in the past, but I mean he avenged Nietes, won the Brueng one was in 2014, so 10 years ago now. He, like I say, avenged Nietes one. He was probably deserving of the rematch in this fight, warranted of just what he's achieved and the run he's been on. It's been very, very impressive. And obviously he had that draw versus Franco in between, but then he managed to avenge that in the rematch. And so he's definitely achieved a lot and done a lot in his career. And so when you look at that, I think it makes sense for a rematch to be made. Obviously, if you are to compare that to something like a Dubois Joshua situation, obviously it's a bit different because Joshua got knocked out badly. Dubois then shouldn't realistically have to rematch Joshua. Joshua hasn't, he's a big name and he has achieved a lot, but it's not at that same level of what Ioka has achieved in the way of, multi-weight world champion. And, Joshua hasn't, well, he has been multi-time world champion, but it's not the same kind of thing in my opinion, if that makes sense. And, the fact that also he got knocked out badly. Ioka, he didn't get knocked out badly, so I feel like he deserves that rematch, and he's got that rematch, and like I say, it's nice to see, and it's just going to be interesting to see, personally, what his physicality is like, because Martinez came in really physically strong in that first fight, and to be honest, it was a little bit sad to see at times the way that he was getting kind of thrown about the ring, especially into the later rounds, Ioka, and I just don't know if physically he's able to still match the guys that he's fighting in against. I don't know if, he's not incredibly old, and I think the age of champions of boxers are increasing, but I just don't necessarily know physically if he's able to still match the kind of level in which he's been dealing with, he's been in with, and if he's able to match the level of physicality that he's in with now versus Martinez, because Martinez is that younger guy, and like I say, was just able to be very bullish versus Ioka in that first fight. But to speak a bit more about them both individually as fighters, Ioka as a fighter, he's got that excellent, relatively consistent jab. To be honest, he didn't use it enough versus Martinez, and I think that's perhaps credit down to Martinez being able to close the distance, being able to really continually be in Ioka's face and make it difficult for him. And Ioka wasn't able to use that jab, in which, like I say, he is excellent with when he does use it, and the way that he throws it is very difficult to be able to counteract, and the speed in which he throws it as well. It is just an excellent punch, and when you are perhaps looking at young boxers coming through, you kind of probably should say to them, look at a guy like Ioka's jab. It is an excellent jab. The way he throws it, you've got to really analyse it and study it and learn it and understand it. to be able to know, to be able to improve your own jab. So, Ioka has that level of, I suppose, inspiration in that way with just the great jab in which he throws. He picks his shots very well. I think he's got underrated power. It's power in which, when he lands with the accurate shots in which he throws, when he goes to the body, it's going to hurt. Martinez took a lot of body shots, and that's full credit to him to being able to deal with the amount of body shots in which he took. But he took a lot of body shots. If he's taking that many again from Ioka, I'm just not too sure if he's going to be able to keep coming forwards and keep being able to deal with it the way in which he was. There was times in which it seemed like he did have to back off a bit and did have to let Ioka come onto the front foot just a little bit, because the shots in which he was taking, like I say, came from underrated power, and Ioka was landing aggressively, powerfully, and well, and it was going to the body. And yeah, in general, I feel like he has underrated power. He's got very good counters when he uses them. I don't think he used them perhaps well enough versus Martinez, in which he could have. I feel like Martinez's style, Ioka at times, with the relatively good head movements in which he has, there was times in which he was getting caught with shots, Ioka, very cleanly. But a lot of the time, some of the really wide shots in which Martinez were throwing that were perhaps seen as a bit more visible, a bit more predictable, he was able to really kind of slip the Ioka, but he just wasn't able to counter the same way in which he normally does. He's got good head movement, like I say, to an extent. He throws shots from high, which is nice. He'll go high around the guard and, throw hooks from his head, which is a nice thing as well. Sometimes fighters drop their shots or open them up a bit more, and it just means that you're more likely to get caught with a big counter when you land your own. And Ioka doesn't do that, which is nice to see. He goes to the body, like I say, very well. He can fight on the front of the back foot. Martinez, a lot of the time, was on the front foot, but when he did get backed up and did get, or did back off a little bit, he was able to still fight on the back foot. So I feel like both of them can fight on the front of the back foot. He's accurate, like I say, in his work, a lot more accurate than that of Martinez. I think his technical skill is clear than that of Martinez. It's a much more complete fighter than that of Martinez, and perhaps in his heyday, in his prime, he could have been able to really kind of slow down Martinez a lot more than he did in that last fight. But Martinez, full credit to him, the amount of shots he was able to take, the way that he was still coming forwards, it's impressive. And I just feel like Ioka's, like I say, technical skill is much better, but it's just a stylistic matchup in which perhaps isn't going in Ioka's favour. He's got a great uppercut. I think Martinez's uppercut is good as well, but Ioka's, the way that he hides it, he was landing very consistently with it versus Martinez, and Martinez, like I say, wants to get in close, and so when he did, Ioka was having a lot of success with that uppercut, and he's never out of a fight as well. He looked physically quite drained, and it looked like he was struggling, to be honest, into the later rounds versus Martinez, but he was never out of it, continually throwing, continually giving his all, really trying to fight right to the very end of the fight, and, perhaps getting drawn into a bit of a fight at times and just swinging overhands in a bit, which made for a good fight, made it for it to be entertaining, but it showed that he never is out of a fight, which is full credit to him, even at the, the age that he's at and the fights in which he has had. Negatives about him, I think his footwork moving back can sometimes be a bit of an issue. I feel like he does go back in straight lines and he's quite flat-footed, and he isn't really too willing to move backwards too much. He can fight on the back foot well, but his actual footwork on the back foot I don't think is excellent. He's not light and bouncing and trying to slip shots really on the back foot. He's a bit more kind of, jump flat-footed, walk a bit flat-footed type of style on the back foot. He ducks his head down a bit. I think his reactions aren't perhaps what they are used to be. I think perhaps he is slowing down a little bit. This fight might prove me wrong, and I'm more than happy for it to prove me wrong, but I think perhaps, like I say, he is slowing down a little bit. He squares up, he can be drawn into a fight. I think, like I say, physically, he's not that strong, and Martinez is that bullish physical figure, and I just don't know if he can match that. I'm not too sure. He doesn't necessarily always change plans. I think he was, fighting quite similarly throughout the whole of the fight, even though things weren't necessarily going right. And the only thing I suppose he changed was that the fact he got drawn more into a fight, which made it even worse. I think his urgency might have dropped a bit as well, of is actually willing to, go for them counters, really react and really trying to control the pace himself. He was kind of happy to let Martinez control the pace. He stays in range. He can sometimes walk onto shots as well. And so, just them things in general, which I saw in the last fight, which in my opinion looked a bit, a little bit off from his performance. Martinez as a fighter, of course, like I say, he's an aggressive, typically front foot type fighter who, like I say, can fight in the back foot when he backs off, but typically wants to be on the front foot. He turns into his punches nicely and really was working the angles well versus Ioka in that first fight, and comes with that entourage of punches in which he's doubling up punches, pairing up punches very well, and going round the guard with his punches nicely as well, and was catching Ioka quite a lot by going round his guard. He's typically, like I say, an in-close type fighter. He's got that physical pressure. He catches punches nicely as well. He's got a nice tight guard. Ioka has a high guard. Martinez has quite a tight guard. So, for a lot of the time he was catching punches, maybe not quite so much to the body, but for a lot of the time he was catching punches well. He's relentless. He's got a relentless output. He's, like I say, got a compact guard. He sets the pace and was really setting the pace versus Ioka and not letting Ioka control that tempo at all, which he definitely can do if you allow him to get into that rhythm behind his jab. But Martinez did not allow him to do that. He's got very good short shots as well, and that's something in which you have to be able to have if you're going to have a really good inside game. You have to be able to, like I say, twist your body into the shots, throw them short, snappy shots, and he did that well. If it was the occasional kind of surprising straight shot or the uppercut, it seemed to have a lot of success against Ioka. Negatives about him, I think obviously he has a bit of a lack of jab, he has a lack of defensive movement, and perhaps if Ioka's movement was a bit better, he might be able to make Martinez struggle with his shots, because I do think he is wild. I do think he overreaches and overcommits as well, and when he is at a range and at a distance, I think he's not fighting his best at all, and that's where Ioka can have his success best. So I just think Ioka needs to get his movement a little bit better and really not get drawn into a fight into the later rounds. I think he squares up. I think he takes punishment to the body, which, like I say, is he going to be able to take that much punishment to the body from Ioka in this fight than he did in the first fight? I'm not too sure. I think he definitely does headhunt as well and was doing that quite a lot. He leaves his head in, and I think his power to actually finish fights, I think he's got, of course, that aggressiveness and that seemingly ability to finish fights, but it just doesn't look like he is able to. It looks like he should be able to, but he actually isn't able to, and it's just a surprising little kind of thing about his game, I suppose. Martinez is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Martinez will win via TKO in round 9. Like I said, was just mentioned a second ago, power to actually finish fights. I think he's going to be physically too much for Ioka, so I don't know if necessarily he's going to land a big powerful punch, but I think Ioka just physically isn't going to be able to match him. I think he was looking weathered in that first fight from Martinez's entourage of punches, and I think he's going to be physically not going to be able to handle him and going to take punishments, going to take shots, and then going to get worn down and then beaten down in the end, and it could be quite a sad stoppage, to be honest. And in my opinion, if he does lose like that, perhaps he should retire. He's been a great fighter, a great champion, and has bought some great nuts for Japanese boxing, and was quite a big name for Japanese boxing to really kind of inspire, I'm sure, quite a lot of fighters, because, obviously he's not on the older side, but he was one of the kind of big names to be able to come through in Japanese boxing, and it would be sad, of course, to see him go out in a bad way, but there's nothing that's been bad in what he's done in his career, and so if he is to retire, then I wouldn't see anything wrong with that at all, but we'll have to wait and see. Then who he could go on to fight next, Martinez, Jimenez is that interim champion, so, he beat Scrappy Ramirez in their fight, and so Jimenez could come in as the interim champion and go on to fight Martinez. That wouldn't surprise me. Of course, he probably would want the IBF title. Now it's vacant. Bibiano versus Garcia may rematch again for the title. If not, one of them might fight Martinez. If not, Contreras might fight Martinez. If not, Tanaka might fight Martinez for that belt. Like I say, there's various different options that could happen. Of course, the Bam Rodriguez fight is the big fight in the division and the fight in which everybody wants. And to be honest, there aren't too many big fights left for Bam Rodriguez in the division. I'm not too sure if he's ready to move up as of yet. So perhaps a Martinez fight could offer something a bit different, a bit more of a perhaps aggressive opponent, another young, aggressive opponent to go up against. Rodriguez, a bit different from the older opponents in which he's been facing in recent times, bar, Sonny Edwards. But that's, Martinez and Sonny Edwards have a completely different style. So, that could be a good fight to be made. And unification fights, it seems like Eddie is keen for unification fights for Rodriguez. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.